He was already holding the note when the gun came out. That detail matters. People will focus on the weapon, the corridor, the standoff, a royal guard with his sidearm drawn inside Windsor Castle, aimed at a man who had spent 60 years being untouchable. They will write about the protocol breach. They will write about the career risk. Some will write about the audacity of a sergeant from Barnsley pointing a gun at a knight of the realm. None of them will mention the folded piece of paper in his left hand. But that's where the story actually lives. In the note. In the boy who wrote it. In the 4 words the boy said when he handed it over. Alone in a marble corridor with no equerry, no aide, no protection officer, just a child and a decision, and whatever quiet courage looks like at 11 years old. Before we show you the moment Holloway's weapon cleared its holster, before Sir Edmund Crail's 60 years of untouchable authority ran headlong into one guardsman who simply would not move, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Then tap like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Because today's story isn't about a gun drawn in a palace corridor. It's about what was in the other hand, and why that mattered more. The East Service corridor at Windsor smells like polish and cold stone, and the particular stillness of a place that has been important for so long it has forgotten how to be anything else. Nothing moves out of sequence here. Every footstep is accounted for. Every face is known. The corridor exists in a state of permanent architectural confidence, the kind of confidence that comes not from security, but from the assumption that nothing bad could possibly happen in a place this significant. Sergeant James Holloway had worked in that assumption long enough to know exactly how dangerous it was. He stood at his post the way he always stood, weight distributed, shoulders level, eyes moving without appearing to move. 3rd-generation military. His grandfather had gone down the Orgreave Pit Road in 1984 waving a NUM banner. His father had done 2 tours of Northern Ireland and come home with a limp and an absolute refusal to discuss either. James had joined the parachute regiment at 18, served in places he still didn't name at dinner tables, and ended up here, red tunic, bearskin on state occasions, sidearm always, the particular professional stillness of a man who had been genuinely dangerous in several countries and had learned to carry that very quietly. His uncle had called him a traitor when he took the posting. His mother had cried, but she'd cried proud. The paradox of the uniform had never left him. He wore it anyway, every morning the same choice. He had stopped needing to explain it to anyone, including himself. Which is why, when he felt the light touch against his glove, tentative, precise, the touch of someone who had thought carefully about whether to do this, he turned without alarm. Prince George stood at his side. Alone. No one was ever alone in this corridor. That was the first thing wrong. The boy was in school clothes, not formal wear, dark trousers, a blue shirt with the collar slightly off-center. His hair was neat, but his face was the face of someone who had been holding something in for long enough that holding it was becoming its own kind of exhaustion. He wasn't crying. He wasn't shaking. He was simply there, with a folded piece of paper extended in one hand, looking at Holloway with the specific directness of a child who has decided that adults cannot be trusted to figure things out on their own. Holloway's voice dropped without thinking. "Your Royal Highness." George didn't lower the paper. "Can you make sure she gets this?" 4 words after the please. The note held steady in his hand, white paper, folded twice, slightly creased at one corner like it had been opened and refolded. Holloway's eyes moved across it without reaching for it. He took one breath. "Who is she?" he asked. George looked at him. "You know who." Holloway took the note. It was lighter than it should have been for something that had just changed the weight of the afternoon. He didn't open it. He held it, and he looked at the boy properly for the first time, and that's when he saw it. The collar of George's shirt, right side, just above the second button, was pulled slightly, the fabric distorted in the specific way fabric distorts when someone has grabbed it and then thought better of it and let go. A faint mark at the base of his neck. Not a bruise. Not yet. The kind of mark that would be nothing by tomorrow and was everything right now. Holloway's spine adjusted by approximately 2 degrees. Nothing visible. Everything changed. "When did you last see her?" he asked. His voice hadn't changed pitch. It never did. George's eyes went to the floor for a moment, then back. "Yesterday afternoon. They said she needed to rest somewhere quieter, that she was overwhelmed." He stopped. "She wasn't overwhelmed. She was fine when I saw her in the morning." "Where did they take her?" "I don't know exactly." A pause. "I tried to follow. One of the household staff stopped me. He was nice about it." George's voice was careful and precise, the voice of someone who had learned very young that saying the wrong thing in the wrong room had consequences. "He said it wasn't appropriate for me to go there right now." "Did you see which direction?" "Toward the back stairs, the ones near the linen storage." George hesitated. "It smelled like the room where they keep the Christmas decorations, like old boxes and something metallic. There was a yellow sign on the wall, a number." He thought for a moment. 6, I think." Holloway noted it, filed it. His left hand, the one without the note, moved to his comm unit, and his thumb found the secondary channel button without looking. One press, held for 2 seconds, released. No sound, no alert, just a pulse, a non-verbal safeguarding code that would sit in the internal protection log with a timestamp and a corridor designation. The kind of signal that didn't go on any public record. The kind that said, "Something is wrong here and I am not yet certain what, but I am certain enough to mark the time." He reached for the small incident report pad on his belt, flipped it open, uncapped the pen. His comm pinged. He looked at the screen. Routine corridor rotation query from the East Gate post. He dismissed it, looked back at the pad, and George spoke again. "They said if I asked about her, it would make things harder for her. That it was a sensitive time and I needed to be patient." Holloway put the pen to the paper. "They said the same thing twice," George continued. "Different people, the same words, sensitive time, like they'd practiced it." The pen stayed where it was. Holloway looked at the boy. "Who said it?" George's jaw tightened slightly, the particular tightness of someone deciding how much to spend. "Mr. Harwick, and then later Mrs. Alton. Senior household. Both of them." Holloway wrote neither name yet. He just held the pen and looked down the corridor in the direction the footsteps were going to come from, because they were always going to come from somewhere. They came from the left. 2 men. Suits the color of careful decisions, not black, not gray, something exactly between that reads as professional and dissolves in memory. They walked at the pace of people who expected their arrival to resolve things. The taller one was already smiling. "Ah, there he is." The voice warm, relieved, pitched for an audience that wasn't there. "We've been looking everywhere. He slipped away during a rather hectic afternoon." Holloway shifted his weight, just slightly, just enough. "He's under safeguarding observation," Holloway said. The smiling one's expression didn't change, but something behind it did, a micro-recalibration, the adjustment of someone who had expected a different kind of obstacle. Of course. We just want to get him back to his rooms. Nice and calm." "On whose authority?" Holloway asked. "The household manager's office. Standard welfare protocol." "I'll need that in writing, with a timestamp and a safeguarding override signature from Senior Protective Services." The second man, shorter, no smile, the particular blankness of someone who considered warmth a waste of energy, stepped forward. "Sergeant, this isn't a security matter. This is a family." "Until I see written override, he doesn't move." Holloway's voice hadn't risen. It hadn't needed to. "That's not a judgment, that's a designation." A silence that had edges. Behind Holloway's shoulder, quiet as a held breath. "They're the ones who stopped me from going to her." The smiling man's eyes moved to George. Something shifted in them, not anger, something colder. The look of a calculation being revised. "Your Royal Highness, your grandmother is expecting you. It would be very good if—" "Don't address him," Holloway said it the way you say the time, factual, absolute. The two men exchanged a look. They were weighing things, how much authority they actually had against how much they were accustomed to not needing. They hadn't brought paperwork because paperwork had never been necessary before. The palace ran on precedent and assumption, and the willingness of everyone inside it to behave as though the established order was self-evidently correct. Holloway was not, and had never been, that willing. He reached for the incident report pad again, uncapped the pen. The shorter man's comm buzzed. He stepped back 2 paces to take it. The smiling man tried once more, dropping his voice to something collaborative. "Sergeant, we're all on the same side here. The boy is distressed. His mother is resting. The best thing for everyone is to get him settled and let the household manage this quietly." Holloway looked at him for a moment. "You used the word quietly twice in that sentence." No response. "Go stand at the end of the corridor," Holloway said. "Both of you, don't move until I tell you." They didn't leave, but they stopped advancing, which was enough for now. In the quiet that followed, George told him the rest of it. Not all at once. In the way that children tell things when they've been warned not to, carefully, in pieces, testing each word before the next one. Holloway asked one question at a time and waited between them, and George answered in the low, reciting voice of someone replaying a recording they'd been running in their head for hours. He hadn't been meant to be in the East sitting room. He'd wanted to show his mother a drawing, something he'd done in art that week, a landscape, nothing significant. He'd gone through the connecting hallway because the main corridor was busy. The door had been slightly open. His mother had been standing at the far end of the room. There were 2 men with her. One of them a household manager George knew by sight. One of them a man he didn't recognize but had seen near his grandfather's car. There was a document on the table between them. George stopped. "She was shaking her head," he said. "Not upset, just no, steady. She kept saying no." Holloway waited. One of them picked up her phone from the table, just picked it up, like it was already his. George's voice stayed level, but his hands, Holloway noticed, had closed at his sides. And he said that if she didn't cooperate, there were photographs and footage. He said the narrative was already written, and the only question was which version of it she wanted to live inside. The corridor was very still. She looked up. I think she saw me in the doorway. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me for a second and then looked back at them. George paused. Then someone grabbed my collar from behind, one of the other staff, the one who's always near the back stairs, and walked me away. Not hard, but I couldn't stop. Holloway's expression didn't move. His pen was in his hand. He wasn't writing. "They said it was better this way, that it was for the children, that's what they said." George's voice finally thinned, not breaking, but revealing its edges. "They said it twice, for the children." He looked up at Holloway. "We're the children, she's our mother. How is taking her phone for the children?" He reached into his trouser pocket, brought out something small, pale, slightly irregular. A button, cream-colored, smaller than a thumbnail, with a thread still attached that ended in a clean snap. It had come from a blouse, the kind with small decorative buttons at the cuff. He'd pulled it free when they'd separated him from her, his fingers finding the only solid thing available. He placed it on Holloway's palm. "She hugged me before they took me away," he said. "She told me to be good." He paused. "She didn't say it would be all right. She never says things she doesn't know are true." Holloway closed his hand around the button. He reached for the incident report pad a 3rd time, opened it, found the pen, pressed it to the paper. The pen was dry. He stared at it for 1 second. Then he put it away, took out his personal pen from his inside pocket, and turned back to the page. "You did right coming to me," he said. He didn't look up when he said it. He didn't need to see the boy's face to know what it did there. He just wrote the first line of the report and kept writing. George said nothing for a moment. Then quietly, "They said no one would believe me." Holloway kept writing, "I believe you." Sir Edmund Crail did not enter a room. He arrived in it. 61 years of royal service, equerry, household secretary, senior advisory council, a dozen titles that meant the same thing in different fonts. This man's word carried weight in rooms where most people were never allowed to stand. He was 72 years old and moved like someone who had long ago made peace with the fact that time did not apply to people of sufficient usefulness. He came around the corridor bend alone. No aides. That was the tell, Holloway thought. A man who brings aides is managing a situation. A man who comes alone believes he can dissolve it. James, Crail said. He used the first name deliberately. Holloway noted this the way you note a card being played. Sir Edmund. Crail's eyes moved to George, a brief, assessing look that contained not 1 gram of warmth, and then back to Holloway. I understand there's been some confusion this afternoon. No confusion, Holloway said. Crail smiled. It was a very good smile, the kind built over decades of rooms where smiling was a professional tool. The Princess of Wales is receiving medical attention in a private suite. She has been assessed, she is comfortable, and she has requested privacy. Prince George has had a distressing afternoon and has understandably misinterpreted what he saw. He paused. You are a good man, James. You are responding to what you've been told by a distressed child. That is admirable. But this is a family matter, and it is being handled. The words were so reasonable. That was the craft of it, the architecture of the reassurance. Each sentence a small removal of the ground beneath you. Holloway had been in rooms before where the most dangerous thing present was a man being reasonable. I'll need visual confirmation of the Princess of Wales's well-being, Holloway said. Direct, before the prince moves anywhere. Crail's smile didn't leave, but something behind it adjusted. That's not within your authority to demand. It's within my authority to hold this corridor until protective services clear the minor for movement. Protective services have been notified that this is a family welfare matter, not a... I notified them, Holloway said, 40 minutes ago. They're already en route. A beat. The 2 household managers at the end of the corridor had gone very still. Crail's expression remained pleasant, but the pleasantness was now structural, no longer inhabited. He looked at George again, longer this time. Something moved behind his eyes that had nothing to do with concern for the boy and everything to do with what the boy represented as a problem. That look, that was the moment Holloway stopped being uncertain about any of it. Crail stepped toward George, not aggressively, not with any visible intent, just the quiet, proprietary movement of a man used to moving through spaces as though everything in them was already his. Your Royal Highness, Crail said, extending one hand. Come with me, your father is waiting. George looked at Holloway. Holloway's left hand closed over the folded note. His right hand moved to his sidearm. Step back, Sir Edmund. The corridor stopped. Crail turned his head slowly, as though the concept required physical rotation to process. I beg your pardon. Step back. Holloway's voice was the same as it had been all afternoon, measured flat, a voice that had made that register its permanent address. The weapon cleared the holster. He kept the barrel angled down, away from the boy. The posture was precise, unmistakably drawn, unmistakably controlled. You reach for the child without consent or clearance. I am documenting this moment on every system in this corridor. Any further movement toward him is an escalation. Not mine, yours. Crail's face had gone through 3 expressions in 2 seconds and settled on something that wasn't quite fury and wasn't quite fear and was, Holloway thought, probably what 60 years of impunity looks like when it first encounters a wall. You have just ended your career, Crail said. George's voice came from behind Holloway's shoulder, quiet, certain, the voice of someone who has decided to spend the last of what they're carrying. He took my mother's phone. He made her stay in that room. He told me she was resting. A pause. He lied. The silence afterward was the kind that means something has been said that cannot be unsaid, in a space that records everything. Holloway kept his sidearm exactly where it was. Inspector Maren Osai came through the far corridor door with 2 officers flanking her, and the particular quality of movement that belongs to people who have walked into worse scenes than this and considered them Tuesdays. She took in the tableau in approximately 2 seconds. Holloway, weapon drawn, standing between a child and a knight of the realm. The 2 household managers at the far end, frozen in place. Crail, 3 feet from the boy, one hand still slightly extended. "Weapon status," she said to Holloway. "Condition 3, warning posture only, no round chambered." She nodded once, then she turned to Crail. "Sir Edmund, please step to the wall." Crail opened his mouth. "That was not a request framed as a question," Osei said. "Please step to the wall." He stepped to the wall. She crossed to Holloway, speaking quietly. "Silent code came through 42 minutes ago. We've been building the response picture since then." Her eyes moved to George. "Your Royal Highness, my name is Inspector Osei. You're safe. I'm going to ask one of my officers to take you to a room down the hall. There will be someone there who knows you, and no one will ask you any questions until you're ready." "All right." George looked at Holloway one more time. Holloway gave the smallest nod. George went. Osei turned back to the room and issued 3 instructions in the time it takes most people to clear their throat. The 2 household managers to separate holding, Crail to remain with a constable at his elbow. The location clue, yellow sign, storage corridor, room 6, to be relayed immediately to the basement response team. Then she looked at Holloway. "Your report." He reached for the pad, opened it. The first line was there, written in his personal pen. He handed it to her. She read it, said nothing for a moment. Then, "Keep going, I'll need everything." He kept going. The door to room 6 was behind a yellow hazard sign in the basement corridor that smelled, exactly as George had said, of old boxes and something metallic. The specific cold breath of spaces that store things no one needs, until suddenly they need them completely. The response team overrode the external code lock in under 90 seconds. The door opened onto a room that was not a cell, cream walls, adequate lighting, a small table, a chair, a narrow bed that had not been slept in. Medical-grade quiet. The kind of room designed to communicate this is not punishment while communicating something else entirely through the locked door and the absent phone. Catherine was standing when they entered, still in the clothes she'd been wearing the day before. One shoe on, one off. She'd taken the left one off at some point and hadn't put it back. On the table, a document, several pages. Formal letterhead, unsigned. A pen beside it that she had apparently not touched. She looked at the first officer through the door, then at the open corridor behind him. "Where is George?" she said. "Safe, ma'am. He's with Inspector Osei's team." He reached out to. He found a guard. Her voice shifted. Something in it broke open and then immediately reset itself into something harder and more determined. She stopped, looked at the document on the table, then at the officer. "I want to see my son." "Of course, if you'll." She was already moving. Bare heel on the cold stone floor, the missing shoe left behind without a backward look. She walked through the door and down the corridor and up the stairs and through 2 more doors with the specific momentum of someone who has been still for too long and will not be still for one more second. An officer moved to guide her. She didn't stop. He kept pace instead. When she came through the door into the room where George was sitting with a female constable and a cup of tea he hadn't touched, he looked up. She crossed the room in 3 steps. No words. Not yet. Just her arms around him and his face against her shoulder, and the particular silence of 2 people confirming that the other one is real and present and here. She held him for a long time. Then she pulled back, looked at his face, looked at his collar, at the small distortion in the fabric, at the mark just above the button line, and her expression did something complicated and then became very calm and very still. The stillness of a decision being made. She looked at the constable. "I want to speak to whoever is in charge of this operation, before anyone else, before my husband, before anyone." "Inspector Osai is." "Now please." William arrived 12 minutes later. He came through the main corridor door in civilian clothes. He'd been off-site, reached by secure channel, had driven back himself. He stopped when he saw Catherine and George together on the bench, George's head against his mother's arm, Catherine's hand in his hair. He stood there for a moment without speaking. Then he crossed to them, and there was a brief, quiet exchange of hands and foreheads, and the checking of faces that happens when a family has been split apart and is counting itself back to whole. Then he straightened and turned. Osai gave him 40 seconds of summary. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to the officer beside him and spoke 4 sentences. All access credentials for Crail and his associated household staff to be suspended, effective immediately. Every corridor log from the past 72 hours to be pulled and audited by external protective services, not internal. The document found in room 6 to be treated as material evidence, not a palace matter, a legal matter, and a full welfare review of the children's access and movement protocols to be completed within 14 days by an independent body. The officer was already on his comm before the 4th sentence finished. William looked at Osai. "Holloway." "East Corridor," she said. "He's completing his report." William nodded. He walked to the East Corridor. Holloway was standing at his post. He'd returned there after handing off the note and the button and the completed report. The note had gone to Catherine through Osai, delivered without comment, as requested. The button was in evidence. The report was logged. He was standing as he always stood, weight distributed, eyes moving without appearing to move. William stopped in front of him. He looked at Holloway for a long moment, the kind of look that is trying to find the right words and concluding that the right words are probably not the ones that exist. He nodded. Holloway nodded back. That was all of it. That was enough. George came down the corridor a minute later, Catherine's hand in his. He stopped in front of Holloway. He looked up at him with the particular gravity of an 11-year-old who has learned something true today about how the world works and is still deciding what to do with it. He held out the folded note. Holloway looked at it. "That's yours." "You can keep it," George said. "She already knows what it says." He paused. "I told her while I was waiting. I remembered every word." Holloway took the note. He held it carefully, the same way he'd held it all afternoon, in the hand that wasn't occupied with anything more urgent. George turned to follow his parents. Then he stopped, looked back once. "My great-great-great-grandfather's army fought against yours," he said. "Did you know that?" Holloway looked at him. "I did." George thought about this for a moment. "Why did you do it then? The uniform, all of it." Holloway was quiet for long enough that it was an answer in itself. Then, "Same reason you wrote the note instead of just waiting, because some things need someone to do them." He paused. "Turns out I was the someone." George nodded slowly, the way people nod when they've received something they'll need time to fully open. Then he walked back to his parents. The East Service corridor was quiet again. Holloway stood at his post. The note was in his inside pocket, next to his personal pen. The incident report was filed, logged, time-stamped, every line of it complete, which had taken him most of the afternoon and 3 writing instruments and more interruptions than any single form deserved. He'd written the last line 20 minutes ago. He thought about it now, standing in the polishing coldstone silence. His grandfather's hands had held a banner on a road in South Yorkshire in 1984, standing against a system he believed had taken everything from people like him. His father's hands had held a rifle in places that didn't appear on the maps they showed civilians, serving a country he loved with a complicated and undemonstrated faithfulness. His own hands had held today a folded piece of paper and a sidearm, and a line that no one else in the building had been willing to hold. All three of them, in the end, had been protecting something. The paradox wasn't a contradiction. It never had been. Loyalty wasn't a thing you inherited like a title or a debt. It was a thing you chose every morning in the specific shape of the day in front of you. The first line of the incident report read, "At approximately 15:40 hours, a miner approached my post alone and disclosed a safeguarding concern regarding a protected individual. I logged the disclosure, secured the miner, and held the corridor. Everything after that was standard procedure." Standard procedure. The marble corridor said nothing. The stone held its cold. Somewhere in the residential wing, a family was counting itself back together. Holloway stood at his post. He'd been the someone. That was enough. What would you have done, standing in that corridor? Would you have held the line against 60 years of institutional weight, on the word of an 11-year-old and a folded note? Or would you have waited for someone with more authority to make the call? Drop your answer below. If this story stayed with you, like the video, subscribe and hit the bell. Share it with someone who needs to remember that sometimes the most important person in the room is the one nobody expected to matter. More stories are on your screen right now. Click one to keep watching. I'll see you tomorrow.